Hello, it's Stuart, the Unrepentant Atheist. So I've got a call here today from 2016. It's Chan calling in. He spent about 20-25 minutes talking about free will, etc. So I don't want to get into that. Just briefly, my position on free will is I don't know if I've got free will. It seems to me that I make free choices, but depending on the definition, I don't know whether or not I've got free will. And that's all there is to it. It doesn't bother me. So let's move on with this then, because Matt moved it on to, well, why do you believe in God? And he says, well, there's a ton of evidence, but I haven't got time to go through it. And he said, well, just give me one example. He says, well, we've got, for example, the cosmological argument. Matt quite rightly says, well, that just gets you to a cause. How do you get to your Christian God? And then he says, well, there's other evidence. So we're going to pick up the conversation here.
I agree with you.
But yet you got there.
Yeah.
Well, but it wasn't through just the cosmological argument.
Okay, what was it?
The case for Christianity is not boiled down to just one argument. It's a compilation of multiple arguments.
I understand that.
Yeah, this is the take 100 weak arguments and you've got one strong one.
So
Yeah.
we're defending Christianity now, right? So
Yeah.
your view is that there's a God.
Yes.
Presumably, does he interact with reality in any detectable way?
Yes, I believe so. If you're asking me about miracles,
Okay, how do you detect that?
how do you detect a miracle?
Well, I asked you if he interacted with reality
He's playing dumb.
in a detectable way, and you said yes. And so I want to know how you detect that.
How would you? Okay, well, there's a couple of different ways. One, the biggest one of them all, is the resurrection of Jesus. If Jesus rose from the dead,
But I don't have any reason to believe
Yeah.
that's the case. But even if I did, how did you detect that and investigate it and confirm that the best explanation for Jesus rising from the dead is God?
because if Jesus rose from the dead, then we have historical evidence of a divine miracle, which means that God.
No, you have evidence of somebody being dead and then not being dead. How do you establish what the cause of that situation is?
How do you establish what the cause of that? Because dead people don't come back from the dead by natural causes.
Yeah, I think that I wouldn't have gone down this road that Matt's going down. Obviously, if somebody dies and then they come back from the dead, if they're definitively dead, stick a knife through their heart, make sure they bleed out, drive a stake through their head, and watch the body overnight, and then it comes back the next day. You know they're definitively dead and they're alive. I would have to count that as a miracle. I know what Matt is saying, that how do you then connect it with that it's the resurrection that with the existence of God. I know what Matt's saying, but he's kind of, like conceding that this could have happened.
How do you know?
Huh?
How do you know?
How do you know? Well, as far as I've observed, it's the same way you know. You haven't
No.
observed that.
This is the black swan fallacy. You're concluding that because you haven't observed anybody coming back from the dead by natural causes, that when you actually were able to confirm that somebody did come back from the dead, it couldn't have been natural.
Well, you see, this is the thing. Matt there is sort of saying he's kind of implying that it's been confirmed that Jesus came back from the dead. I would have avoided that. I never give an inch. He could have said it's not historically been accepted that Jesus did come back from the dead, but just for the sake of argument, even if he did and even if that was confirmed, I think that I would have put that disclaimer in first.
And you can't conclude that.
Hey, Matt, I've never heard of I'm not familiar with the black swan fallacy.
Sure,
The
black swan fallacy is once upon a time, the only swans we knew of were white.
Yeah, just coming back to this thing. Of course, I understand what Matt's saying, but if we had a confirmation of somebody coming back from the dead, it would smash the materialist model, because it would obviously be a true miracle. It would be against everything we know about biology. So this has never been confirmed that anybody has come back from the dead, and I would not even be prepared to entertain it as a possibility. And I was surprised that Matt went down this road.
And so someone would argue that there are no black swans because nobody's ever seen a black swan. Well, it turns out there are black swans. I saw them in Australia. And basically, it is this argument that because something hasn't been observed as possible, therefore it is impossible. So the fact that you aren't aware of any natural process by which somebody could come back from the dead does not mean you can conclude that it must have been supernatural. That's an argument from ignorance.
But could we infer that the best explanation of Jesus rising from the dead?
How can the best explanation?
Well, it might not be supernatural. I agree with him there. But it would still be an event which would turn biology on. Well, I suppose it wouldn't turn biology on its head. But if it could be conclusively proven that somebody had been definitively dead, say the brain starved of oxygen for 10 hours. I mean, it would be mush by that time. And they came back from the dead the next day and they were completely okay. It would, there would be huge implications for that. Maybe not to the whole of materialism, maybe it went a bit too far there, but it would certainly get a lot of Christians very excited.
Okay, so a supernatural raising of the dead is miraculous, and we have no evidence for it. We can't examine it. We have no evidence for that we can say, yes, this sort of thing happened, this sort of miraculous thing happens. So how could you ever determine that the best explanation is the one that by definition is the least probable?
Because you don't use a relative frequency theory, which sounds like that's what you're doing there. That doesn't always work.
Well, here's the thing. If there have been exactly 0 confirmed miracles, how do you ever conclude that a particular instance was that the best explanation was that it was miraculous without demonstrating that it was?
I'm not sure I'm following your question.
Sure. If I've in the entire history of the world, how many confirmed miracles have we had?
In the entire history of the world, how many confirmed?
How many times have we confirmed that something happened as a result of supernatural intervention?
I have no idea.
The answer is 0.
I have no idea. I don't think he thinks the answer is 0. I think he probably thinks it's something between 1 and 1,000, and he doesn't know the exact figure. That's why he said he's got no idea. Yeah, that's. I think that I don't think he thinks it's 0.
There's none. There's no confirmed instances of supernatural. This is the reason why science can't appeal to the supernatural, because we can't.
The only way you could say that, Matt, the only way you could say that if you investigated every claim that has ever been.
So, all right. So I understand what your objection here is with regard to me making this universal negative declaration. That's not...
Yeah, well, that's like the argument that how can you know religion's true unless you've read through all the scriptures, you've experienced it, you've worshipped it and everything. And because, for example, if I say that all religions are false, how can you know that's the case unless you've gone out there and investigated the whole lot of them to the full? And I suppose my answer to that would be that if any of the religions were proven correct, that we would know about it, and there would only be one world religion.
Not the case. We are prohibited. We have no way to confirm supernatural existence or causation. What method do we have by which we could ever confirm or currently confirm that the supernatural exists or that it interacts in reality?
Well, I mean, I could think of a few.
Okay.
If it happened.
Cause of supernatural influence.
Well, the way that a miracle is defined, I think there's 2 ways that we could
Why is he going to the definition? Why doesn't he just answer the question?
Confirm it if it happened, but two things have to happen. One, it needs to be an event that violates natural law, and secondly, there needs to be it needs to be surrounded by a religious context.
Okay.
Okay. For example, if this happened, if my preacher, let's say I went to church and my preacher was preaching, and ISIS came in, and ISIS jihadis came in and took over the congregation, and in front of all of us, they beheaded our pastor.
It's funny, but when he said ISIS, when I listened to this before, I thought he was talking about the Egyptian goddess, not the fundamentalist militant Islamic group.
And then they ran out, and then the FBI came in and they arrested them for what they did. They caught them. And then the next Sunday, we were wondering who was going to be the preacher. And all of a sudden, our preacher walked in after we had seen him beheaded. And he said, the reason why this has happened is so I can proclaim the truth of Christianity and say that Islam is false. Now, if that happened, couldn't we say that would have been a miracle?
So no, first of all, but do you have any example of anything like that ever being confirmed as happening?
In my own personal life?
In any...
In my own personal life. What a strange guy this is.
Buddy's life.
I can't speak for anybody else. I have personally not witnessed a miracle that violated natural law like what you're talking about.
Well, you say that miracles violate natural law. I'm looking for examples of things that have been confirmed to happen which violate natural law. You give an example of the type of thing, which, by the way, I've seen people beheaded. I've engaged in beheadings on stage, and they can be faked.
Oh, but you're talking about an illusion. Is that what you're talking about there?
I'm just saying that on your description, on that information alone, you cannot tell how or why something happened.
Oh, I kind of think that's unnecessary. I think that he should just accept the example of the miracle, that his head really was lopped off, because this is sort of sidetracking things.
Well, if a jihadi came in and he took a sword and cut our pastor's head off, and I let's just say that event actually happened.
Okay, how did you confirm it? I mean, we don't need to get into all the details of confirming this. The question is, are there any examples like that? Because if there's not, then we can't even get to the starting point of exposing why you can't reach that conclusion.
Well, I'm just saying, if something like that happened.
Okay, and if elephants fly out of my butt, that would be a miracle too, but it hasn't happened. So I don't get to appeal to that.
I understand what you're saying.
We often hear Christians saying, so you atheists, you don't believe. What's it going to take to make you believe? What kind of miracle? If the cloud suddenly formed to say, I am here, signed God, would that be enough to convince you? And then you say to them, well, has anything remotely like that ever happened? It would be quite something to see it. I can't promise that it would convert me, but has anything like that remotely ever happened?
Matt, if you're asking me, have I seen a miracle and confirmed it? The answer is no, I haven't.
Are you aware of anyone who has had a miracle happen and confirmed it?
Yes.
Okay.
Great. I can't wait to hear his real case of a miracle. Given that he's just provided a case of somebody having his head cut off and come back to preach a sermon the following day, let's see what it is.
What was the miracle and how did they confirm it?
Now, but you're saying if they had a subjective... All right, let me say this. They're obviously, in church, you have church members that have said they had cancer. It was verified by the doctors.
You know that cancer goes into remission as a purely natural thing, right?
I know. I knew you were going to say that, and I get that. And it's very possible.
And you know what? You knew I was going to say that, but I knew you were going to go to cancer. I knew you were.
Well done, Matt. You really drew him out. You really you know, you really set a trap for him there. And after all this wasted time, we prayed, and it cured his cancer.
We're going to leave the realm of the miraculous beheaded preacher who comes back and go to something absolutely mundane like cancer going into remission. I mean, those two things aren't even comparable, because if somebody comes in and prays and they have been confirmed to have cancer and they pray and the cancer goes away, how did you determine that it wasn't natural, but instead was God answering prayer?
Okay, that's a great question.
I know.
I don't think it is a great question. It's a fair question. I'm glad you're asking it. And it could be, you're absolutely right. It could be that was natural causes, or it could be that it was the doctors.
Right. So that makes it what? That makes it what? One word starts with an I.
That makes
irrelevant.
There's a lot of words.
It makes it irrelevant. If you cannot confirm, the whole point of this was to show something that you could confirm was supernatural. And the example you give, by your own acknowledgement, you cannot confirm whether it was natural or supernatural. That makes it irrelevant.
Right. And that's why, Matt, I used the example of the beheading of the preacher.
Sure. I tell you what, Chan, we've gone on for a long time, and I've monopolized this, and Jen has been incredibly patient. As soon as you have a beheaded pastor that is confirmed by multiple doctors and buried with his head separate from the body, and then the grave is empty and he's preaching the next week, call me back.
Okay. This proves something. What does it prove? We've got a man here, we've got a Christian who claims to know a lot about free will. He claims to know a lot about the arguments for the existence of God. He claims that a miracle happened, and then when examined, had to admit that it was not a sound example, that the cancer could have been cured by natural causes. So what does this whole thing prove? It proves that we've got a Christian here, like so many others, who does not know how to honestly assess evidence, who is so filled up with confirmation bias that he can't be trusted to assess any evidence whatsoever. If he couldn't see through the way that Matt so eloquently debunked his so-called cancer miracle, if he couldn't see without Matt having to help him that this is not a miracle, this is not confirmation of a miracle at all, then he can't be trusted to assess any evidence whatsoever. And his belief in God can only possibly be blind faith, or based on personal experience, not on the assessment of any evidence, because he's not capable of assessing evidence. I hope you agree with me. Leave comments below, and thank you for tuning into my channel. I'll be back again soon with another video. Thanks for watching.